You, if you walk into the highest court in the United States, right, and you look directly above the justices' heads and actually read the stone carvings up there, you will find something that totally shatters the conventional story of American
Oh,
history.
absolutely. It's wild.
Yeah, you see the Prophet Muhammad carved in marble holding the Quran. So today we are doing a deep dive into a stack of historical blueprints, some architectural infographics, and foundational documents that reveal this massive global tapestry explicitly built into America's most sacred spaces.
Right, because it really challenges what we think we know.
Okay, let's unpack this, because walking through Washington, D.C. with these sources in hand is, it's like finding a hidden track on an album you've listened to 100 times.
That's a really good way to put it.
Right. You expect the familiar localized heritage, men in powdered wigs, maybe some Greek togas, just a very linear monocultural story. But instead, you look up at the walls of the institutions you thought you knew inside and out, and you discover a much broader, explicitly global blueprint, just, hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, but before we get into examining those specific carvings and paintings, I feel like we need to do a strict neutrality check.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Good call.
Because, look, the modern political landscape is just saturated with phrases like, Judeo-Christian roots. And these conversations often get hijacked by contemporary cultural debates.
Oh, constantly.
Right. So our objective in this deep dive is not to participate in those modern debates. We are not in any way endorsing any specific religious viewpoint or theology.
No, not at all.
Our role is strictly analytical today. We are simply reporting on what the foundational legal documents and the actual physical walls of these institutions explicitly state and display. We're just looking at the objective historical reality of the choices made by the architects and the leaders who built the country.
Yeah, that is a crucial baseline to establish. We're just reading the blueprint and examining the masonry, nothing more. And to understand why those physical buildings feature such a broad array of global figures, we kind of have to start with that foundational legal blueprint. Because looking at our sources concerning the legal origins of the U.S., a striking pattern emerges almost immediately.
It really does. It's right there in the text.
Yeah. Neither the United States Constitution nor the Bill of Rights explicitly states that the country is rooted in a specific religious tradition. There is just this deliberate absence of an official state religion.
Right. And the historical context of that absence is, well, it's profound. During the late 18th century, this standard operating procedure for almost every major global power was to formally tie the state to a specific church.
Right, or like a religious monarch or something.
Exactly. So the architectural and legal choices we are going to look at today, they stem directly from a conscious departure from that global norm.
Which brings us to the first really big document in our stack.
Yeah, the historical article we have highlights a really pivotal piece of early American diplomatic history. It's the Treaty of Tripoli, which was signed in 1797.
Right. And the text of Article 11 is incredibly explicit. I'll just quote it directly. It reads, "As the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion."
Wait, unanimous. In 1797. Because the source also points out that this treaty was submitted by President John Adams and then ratified unanimously by the Senate.
Yeah, unanimously. Every single vote.
Getting a unanimous Senate vote in 1797 on the fundamental religious nature of the country is staggering to me. It's like trying to get a modern group chat to unanimously agree on a restaurant.
Oh, good luck with that.
Right, let alone agreeing on the foundational philosophy of a brand new country. To have 0 dissenting votes on a statement that explicit implies a widely shared, philosophical consensus among that founding generation.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that consensus was heavily driven by the dominant intellectual framework of the era, which was the Enlightenment.
The framers were attempting something radically different for the time. They were designing a secular legal framework, basically a philosophical container designed to synthesize wisdom from all across human history.
So they weren't just pulling from one specific tradition.
No, not at all. The Enlightenment mechanism relied on observation, reason, and historical precedent. So by explicitly stating the government was not founded on one specific religion, they weren't just being secular for secularism's sake.
Oh, interesting. So what was the goal then?
Well, they were creating a system equipped to draw from a wide variety of global, historical, philosophical, and legal influences. And they wanted to do that without being tethered to the theological constraints of just a single faith.
Wow. Okay, so this isolationist monocultural view of American history isn't just slightly wrong. It is explicitly contradicted by the founders' own blueprints.
Exactly. It's right there on paper.
And the generations that followed literally carved that contradiction into stone. Because, a treaty on paper is one thing, but how a nation encodes that abstract philosophy into its permanent infrastructure that tells us how they truly viewed their place in the world.
It really does. Architecture speaks volumes.
Right, which takes us straight from the archives into the courtroom of the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, and the architecture of the Supreme Court building perfectly mirrors that conceptual blueprint of the Enlightenment we were just talking about.
Paint us a picture of what's inside.
So inside the courtroom, high above where the justices actually sit, there's this massive marble frieze that was sculpted in the 1930s.
Okay.
And the architectural infographic we are analyzing details this feature. It's known as the Great Lawgivers of History.
The Great Lawgivers.
Right. It features 18 figures chosen by the architects and legal historians of that era for their undeniable impact on the evolution of law. And the roster is remarkably expansive.
I'm looking at the list from the source, and it's wild.
Yeah, you have ancient Babylonian kings like Hammurabi, biblical figures like Moses and Solomon, European emperors like Charlemagne and Justinian.
Mixed in with allegorical figures too, right? Like faith, equity, and philosophy.
Exactly. It's a huge mix.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because right there, alongside Charlemagne and Justinian, the infographic highlights the inclusion of the Prophet Muhammad, depicted holding the Quran.
Yep, carved right into the marble.
Looking at this source, my first thought is that the architects in the 1930s were trying to make a remarkably progressive, maybe even provocative political statement, like placing an Islamic symbol on the main stage of American jurisprudence. Because this isn't some hidden Easter egg carved into a back alley. This is the main stage. Why did the architects in the 1930s choose to place the Prophet Muhammad directly above the heads of the Supreme Court justices?
Well, you might assume it was provocative, especially given that our infographic uses the somewhat sensational title, America's Dirty Little Secret.
Yeah, that title is definitely trying to grab your attention.
It is. But a deeper look at the historical intent reveals it wasn't a secret at all. Nor was it considered particularly provocative by the legal scholars of the 1930s.
Really? It was just standard.
Yeah. It was a deliberate, highly vetted, public recognition of historical mechanics. The architects and historians were acknowledging a global continuum of law.
Oh.
They understood that American jurisprudence did not just materialize out of thin air. It was built on layers and layers of historical precedent. So by placing the Prophet Muhammad there, holding the Quran, they were honoring the Islamic legal tradition as a core pillar of global justice.
So they were basically documenting the chain of custody for human law.
Precisely. They understood how legal principles from the Middle East, concepts regarding contracts, civic administration, and jurisprudence, how those circulated through Mediterranean trade routes.
Oh, and then influenced European codes.
Exactly. They influenced European legal codes and eventually seeped into the common law traditions that ultimately shaped the United States.
That makes so much sense.
It's a visual representation of the exact ideal expressed in the Treaty of Tripoli. Wisdom and legal precedent are drawn from across the globe, transcending geographical and religious boundaries. The Supreme Court Frieze is effectively a bibliography carved in marble, citing the global sources of American law.
A bibliography carved in marble. I love that. So the Supreme Court establishes that the physical infrastructure of the U.S. honors the global roots of jurisprudence.
Right.
But, a civilization requires more than just a legal code to function. It requires innovation, scientific advancement, and just a vast repository of knowledge.
Absolutely. You need the science to back up the society.
Right. So to see how the builders of Washington, D.C. viewed the global roots of human progress, we really only have to walk across the street from the Supreme Court to the Library of Congress.
Yeah, and specifically, we need to look at the Thomas Jefferson Building, which honestly serves as the ultimate architectural sanctuary for human knowledge in the United States.
It's a gorgeous building, too.
It's stunning, and the interior design there is just as intentional and globally minded as the Supreme Court Frieze.
So our infographic breaks down a specific massive mural inside the dome of the Thomas Jefferson Building. It was painted in 1896 by an artist named Edwin Blashfield, and it's titled The Evolution of Civilization.
Right, The Evolution of Civilization.
And the painting features 12 seated figures with each figure representing a distinct nation or a historical epoch that contributed a vital component to the advancement of human knowledge.
Yeah, and the visual details captured in our source highlight the specific contributions assigned to each of those epochs.
What stands out to you there?
Well, among these 12 figures, one is designed to represent Islam, depicted wearing a turban and seated very prominently in the mural. But the crucial piece of information here is what the artist chose to associate with this figure.
Right, because each figure gets a label.
Exactly. Right below the word Islam, the artist explicitly painted the word physics on a scroll.
So what does this all mean? Because seeing Islam explicitly tied to physics on a monumental scroll is fascinating.
It's very deliberate.
I mean, given how history is frequently framed in modern discourse, I think most people today listening to this would expect a historical depiction of Islamic civilization to be linked to theology or philosophy or religious texts.
Sure, that's a common assumption now.
Right. So was Blatchfield just trying to balance out the other scientific disciplines among the figures? Or is there a specific mechanical reason an American artist in 1896 linked Islam to hard physical science?
What's fascinating here is that Blatchfield wasn't just arbitrarily assigning disciplines to make the painting look symmetrical or whatever. He was documenting a strictly accurate mechanical reality of human history, specifically the Islamic Golden Age.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the historians and artists designing the Library of Congress, they understood that during the Middle Ages, while Europe was largely fractured and experiencing this huge period of intellectual stagnation.
Dark Ages, basically.
Right, the Dark Ages. During that time, scholars in the Islamic world were essentially running the world's most advanced research and development laboratories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Places like Baghdad and Cordoba, they weren't merely acting as passive libraries just guarding ancient Greek and Roman texts.
So they weren't just holding on to the baton, they were actively running the next leg of the relay.
They were fundamentally expanding the boundaries of human knowledge. Islamic scholars formalized early iterations of the scientific method. They made massive breakthroughs in optics, which laid the exact groundwork for modern physics.
Optics? That makes so much sense with the physics scroll.
Exactly. And they invented algebra, which served as the mathematical bridge between ancient Greek geometry and the complex equations required for modern engineering and astronomy.
That is huge.
It is. Without the rigorous empirical scientific advancements generated during the Islamic Golden Age, the European Renaissance would have lacked the foundational mathematics and physical sciences necessary to even launch.
Which means the Enlightenment, and by extension, the very tools used by the American founders, would have been severely delayed or maybe entirely different.
Yeah, the timeline of human progress is just a direct chain reaction. By permanently linking Islam directly to physics in the dome of the National Library, the creators of the building were cementing the truth that the scientific method and our modern understanding of the physical world owe an unpayable debt to Islamic scholars.
They really put it right up there on the ceiling for everyone to see.
They did. They were openly acknowledging that the intellectual scaffolding of the United States was built using tools forged in the Middle East.
So when you stack the 1797 Treaty of Tripoli, the 1930s Supreme Court Frieze, and the 1896 Library of Congress mural all together, a highly consistent pattern emerges.
A very clear pattern.
Yeah, these aren't just random architectural flourishes or isolated bureaucratic documents. They act as permanent, enduring evidence of the American experiment's intended design. The founders and the subsequent generations of architects and historians who built the Capitol, they went out of their way to permanently document the fact that they were building on a foundation that spans the entire globe.
And I think that's why this matters so much for you, the listener, today. When you are surrounded by modern political discourse that constantly pushes this narrow, localized narrative about the origins of Western civilization, it is incredibly easy to feel like history is just a simplistic talking point.
Oh, absolutely. The nuance gets completely lost.
Exactly. The sheer volume of information we process daily often flattens the nuance of the past. But the physical blueprints and the marble carvings we have explored today, they provide a tangible anchor.
They really do.
They demonstrate objectively that the very walls of America's most revered institutions were designed to celebrate a much broader, richer, and far more inclusive definition of human achievement. And having this knowledge empowers you to look past the modern noise.
And it is definitely worth reiterating as we conclude this deep dive that looking at these sources is not about advocating for one religious framework over another.
No, not at all.
We are analyzing the objective, historical mechanics of how a nation was constructed. We are recognizing the historical reality that diverse global cultures, including the profound legal and scientific contributions of the Islamic world, were actively utilized and permanently honored in the creation of the United States.
And examining these monuments forces us to consider not only how the builders of the past honor global history, but how we conceptualize human progress today.
Oh, that's a great point.
Which leaves a lingering question to consider after we finish our analysis.
What's that?
Well, if the architects, historians, and leaders of 1797, 1896, and the 1930s were so remarkably deliberate in publicly honoring the cross-cultural global foundations of their civilization, what kinds of figures or cultures would we choose to carve into a brand new national monument built today?
Oh.
If we were tasked with representing the next evolution of human knowledge in stone, would our modern monuments reflect the same sweeping, historically inclusive worldview as the ones built a century ago?
That is the perfect question to mull over, because the next time you imagine walking through Washington, D.C., you aren't just looking at a curated diorama of familiar statues. You are reading the actual blueprint.
Yeah.
You are seeing the global tapestry hiding in plain sight.